The planet of Yindra was a marvel of technological advancement. Nestled in the heart of the galaxy, it was known for its towering spires of crystal that reached into the clouds and its sprawling cities powered by renewable energy. But all that was about to change. In the heart of the Cytherus research facility, Zara, an alien engineer, sat hunched over a terminal, her fingers flying over the controls with remarkable precision. The bright glow of the monitor illuminated her pale, determined face. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she quickly scanned the data in front of her, her heart racing. A low hum from the reactor echoed in the background, vibrating through the walls of the facility. Zara's thoughts were consumed with one thing. How did this happen? She had spent years designing the reactor that now threatened the survival of their entire world. Its purpose had been simple: to harness the power of the planet's energy core and supply it to cities, farms, and factories. It was supposed to be a symbol of their civilization's brilliance, a triumph of engineering. But now, that very creation was tearing the planet apart. "Zara, what's happening?" A voice snapped her out of her thoughts. Rian, her colleague and best friend, stood behind her, his voice laced with fear. His expression mirrored the gravity of the situation. His hands were trembling, his usually steady composure shattered by the sight of Zara's frantic efforts. "The core's energy levels are skyrocketing. It's unstable." Zara's gaze never left the terminal. The numbers on the screen were flashing red, warning signals echoing throughout the room. The reactor was growing too fast, uncontrollably. The feedback loop she had designed to harness the core's energy had gone rogue, expanding exponentially instead of stabilizing. "I know," Zara said, her voice tight. "If we don't shut it down within the next few minutes, the core will collapse and this entire facility will explode. That's not even the worst part. The shockwaves will ripple across the planet. Everything will be destroyed." Her words were cold, detached, but inside, she was panicking. The pressure was suffocating. She built this. She was the one who had designed the reactor's infrastructure. She had tested it countless times, confident that it would work. But now, in the most critical moment, her creation was slipping beyond her control. Rian's eyes widened as he stepped closer, reading the data over her shoulder. "We need to evacuate," he urged, his voice breaking with a mix of fear and urgency. "We can't stop this from happening. It's too late." Zara's fingers hesitated above the console. For a brief moment, she thought about his words. She could leave the facility, save herself, and warn the planet's leaders about the impending disaster, but that was not an option. She turned to Ryan, her face grim. "We don't have time to evacuate. If I leave now, it'll be too late for everyone else." Her voice dropped, barely above a whisper. "I need to stay. I need to fix this." Zara's mind raced as she processed the options before her. There were a few emergency shutdown protocols, but none of them would work in time. The energy spikes were too high, the core too unstable. The system had gone into a failure mode she hadn't anticipated. If she didn't act quickly, it would escalate beyond repair. Zara punched a few keys on the terminal, trying to stabilize the reactor's power flow. The lights in the room flickered as the system hummed in protest, sending shivers down her spine. The air felt thick, as though the entire building was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. Suddenly, a loud, piercing siren echoed throughout the facility. The warning light above the reactor blinked red, accompanied by a voice over the loudspeaker. "Critical failure imminent. Emergency evacuation recommended." Zara's heart pounded in her chest, but she pushed the panic down. She had no time to lose. The reactor's countdown had already begun. Only 3 minutes before complete collapse. In that brief span, she had to find a solution, and fast. Her mind raced back to the design blueprints, the countless simulations, and all the calculations she had done over the years. One solution stood out. It was dangerous, risky, and could very well cost her life, but it was the only shot they had. The core was too powerful for anyone to manually shut down from the outside. But if she could enter the reactor's chamber and bypass the failed system, she might just have enough time to stabilize it before the energy became uncontainable. Zara. No, Rian said, his voice trembling. He reached out, grabbing her arm, before she could make her way to the chamber's emergency suit. There's no way. You can't go in there. It's too dangerous. The radiation levels are off the charts. Even if you manage to fix it, you might not make it out. Zara met his gaze, her eyes fierce, filled with resolve. If I don't, no one will. With that, she grabbed the emergency suit and bolted toward the chamber, her heart pounding in her chest. Every step felt like it could be her last. The seconds were ticking away, and as she stepped into the reactor's heart, she could feel the weight of the universe pressing down on her. The moment Zara entered the chamber, the temperature soared, and the noise from the reactor grew deafening. She could feel the heat searing her skin, the radiation heavy in the air. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. Her hands worked in a blur as she accessed the emergency override system, hoping against all odds that it would still function. In the background, Ryan's voice echoed over the intercom, his words faint but urgent. Zara, don't do this. You have to come back. But Zara didn't answer. Her focus was on the task before her. The world outside had become a distant memory, and only one thing mattered now: saving her home, her people, and herself. As her fingers hovered over the reactor's emergency control panel, she could feel the reactor's heartbeat, growing faster, louder, closer. The countdown was slipping away. The moment of truth was approaching fast. Would she succeed, or would the reactor explode, taking everything she loved with it? There was no turning back now. The hum of the reactor filled the chamber, drowning out all other sounds, except for the pounding of Zara's heart. Her breath came in shallow, quick gasps as she stared at the control panel in front of her. The glowing lights flickered erratically, casting long shadows across the darkened walls of the reactor chamber. Sweat dripped from her brow, her fingers trembling slightly as they hovered above the emergency override. Every moment she spent inside this high-radiation environment was more dangerous than the last. Yet Zara couldn't bring herself to step away. The fate of the entire planet rested on the choices she made in these next few minutes. If she succeeded, she could stabilize the core and save her people, her planet, from certain destruction. But if she failed, if her calculations were wrong, then Hindra would become a charred husk, a shadow of its former glory. The energy from the reactor could burn through the crust of the planet itself, rendering it uninhabitable for millennia. The countdown on the screen blinked red. 2 minutes left. Zara had never felt so vulnerable. The reactor's energy was now reaching dangerous levels, the pressure inside the chamber rising with each passing second. Her mind raced, yet her thoughts were clear. There is only one way to save them all: the manual override. But to access it, she had to enter the most unstable part of the reactor, a section that no one had dared to approach in decades due to the risks involved. The energy there was volatile, unpredictable. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and it would be her end. Suddenly, a voice crackled through the intercom, snapping her from her thoughts. It was Ryan, her closest colleague, and a voice she had trusted for years. Zara, you have to stop, he said urgently. This is insane. You're asking to do the impossible. The radiation levels are rising fast. If you go any further, you'll never make it out. Zara could hear the panic in his voice, but she could feel her resolve solidify. She knew he was right, but there was no other option. The pressure of the ticking clock, the lives of millions of people on her shoulders, left her with a single choice: to risk everything. I'm not leaving, Ryan, Zara replied, her voice strong, though her heart was breaking inside. The reactor will breach in less than 2 minutes. There's no time for me to get back. This is the only chance we have left. Her fingers hovered over the override switch, but doubt crept into her mind. Was this the right decision? Was she truly willing to give her life for the survival of a world that might not even understand the sacrifice she was making? What if, she thought, what if I'm wrong? What if the radiation is already too high, and my body can't survive? But those thoughts were fleeting. The faces of her friends, her family, flashed through her mind. The children who would never know peace, the elderly who would never feel the warmth of the sun again. the people of Yindra whose fates lay in her hands. She couldn't let them down. She couldn't walk away now. There is no turning back. The risk of failure was monumental, but the risk of inaction was far worse. Without another moment of hesitation, Zara slapped her hand down on the control panel, triggering the manual override. The whir of the machinery filled the room, and the display blinked green. It was working. But then, something went wrong. The sudden flash of red lights and the deafening screech of the reactor alarm signaled that her quick fix wasn't enough. The core was buckling under the pressure. A violent jolt shook the room, and Zara was thrown off her feet, crashing into the steel floor with a loud thud. Dazed, she tried to rise, her head spinning. But she couldn't let the pain. "I can't turn back, Ryan," she said, her voice shaky but determined. "I have to finish this. You have to trust me. Tell everyone I love them. This will work. I'm not going to let them die." She didn't wait for his reply. The words hung in the air, but there was no time for further conversation. Zara entered the heart of the reactor's containment field. The control panel in front of her glowed brighter, showing a complete overload of the reactor's capacity. This is the final moment, she thought. The power coursing through the system was chaotic, out of control, and she could feel the instability in every fiber of her being. Her hands, steady despite the chaos around her, connected the final circuit, linking it directly to the core's emergency shutdown mechanism. The sound of crackling energy filled the room as sparks flew from the machinery. Zara gasped for air, her vision blurring, the radiation consuming every ounce of her energy. "Zara!" Ryan's voice echoed once more, but she couldn't hear him anymore. The world was spinning. The reactor was a ticking bomb. This was her impossible decision, one that she knew might be her last. As her fingers completed the final adjustment, a sharp electric hiss sounded, followed by a long, drawn-out silence. The core's energy levels began to stabilize. Zara collapsed to her knees, but the control panel showed signs of success. The reactor was no longer in critical condition. She had done it. But the toll was clear. Zara could feel her body weakening, the radiation taking its toll on her mind and body. The countdown had stopped. But for her, time was running out. In that moment, as the reactor slowly stabilized, Zara smiled faintly. Her sacrifice would save her planet, even if she couldn't make it back. The air in the reactor chamber was thick with heat and tension. Zara, her breath ragged and uneven, stared at the flickering control panel before her. The alarm had stopped, the urgent countdown ceased, but a strange silence had fallen over the room, a silence so loud it rang in her ears. She could feel the radiation coursing through her veins, the weight of the decision she had made settling heavily on her shoulders. The worst of the danger seemed to have passed, but something still felt off. Something deep inside her told her that the battle wasn't over yet. Her body felt heavy, as though every breath she took was dragging her further into exhaustion. The strain from being so close to the unstable reactor was overwhelming. Zara's hands shook as she tried to steady herself against the console, trying to focus through the growing dizziness that threatened to pull her under. The glowing lights of the control panels around her blinked erratically, each flicker sending a fresh wave of panic through her chest. The reactor was stabilizing, but only for now. The core's energy levels had been brought down from critical levels, but Zara knew that this was only a temporary solution. The repair had worked, but the reactor was still in a fragile state, and any small miscalculation could cause it to spiral into chaos again. Every second was a gamble. Zara's eyes flicked to the monitor where the countdown timer had frozen at 0, now blinking with an eerie red glow. The system was stabilizing, but there was still a fatal flaw in the reactor's core that could lead to another catastrophic failure if she didn't act fast. She knew what had to be done. "I can't fail now," she whispered to herself, summoning the last of her strength. Her hands, trembling but determined, moved quickly across the controls. She had to reset the core's power output, recalibrate the safety mechanisms, and lock the reactor into a safe state before it was too late. But the steps she had taken to contain the reactor's instability had caused an unexpected complication. The secondary containment field, which was supposed to hold the core's volatile energy in check, had begun to buckle under the strain of the energy fluctuations. It was already starting to lose its structural integrity. Zara's heart raced as she glanced at the countdown again. She had no time to fix the containment field from the outside. The only option left was for her to enter the deepest, most unstable section of the reactor. The very section she had avoided earlier, where the core's energy was concentrated. The risk was enormous. If she entered, there was no guarantee she'd survive. As she weighed the choice in her mind, Ryan's voice crackled through the intercom once again, but this time, there was a tremor in his tone. "Zara, you need to get out. It's not worth it. You've already done so much. Please don't push your luck." But Zara didn't answer. She couldn't afford to waste any more time. The very future of the planet hung in the balance. Yindra was her home, and no matter the cost, she couldn't let it be destroyed. She couldn't let all the people she had fought for, the ones she loved, die because of one moment of hesitation. "I'm not leaving," Zara said aloud, her voice weak but unwavering. She didn't care if it meant risking her life. Her hands moved with purpose, opening the access hatch to the reactor's core. The light from within seemed to pulse as though the reactor itself was alive, reacting to her presence. With a deep breath, Zara stepped forward, knowing full well that she was walking into the heart of danger. The heat hit her like a wall as, soon as she crossed the threshold, waves of suffocating warmth surrounding her. Her suit's cooling system struggled to keep up, but it was barely enough. The air was thick with the hum of power, the vibrations in the floor sending shocks through her legs with every step. The walls of the core chamber were lined with raw, exposed energy conduits, glowing like veins of molten lava. They pulsed with an unnatural rhythm, each beat threatening to rupture at any moment. Zara could feel the raw force of the reactor surging through the space, and her breath caught in her throat. She had never been this close to the energy source before. It felt like being on the edge of a blade, too close to the edge of destruction, but just far enough to stay alive. Her hands fumbled for the control panel, her fingers weak from the radiation she had already absorbed. Sweat mixed with the burning heat as she recalibrated the safety parameters, the once erratic lights now flashing a steady rhythm. She had only moments before the unstable core would become too dangerous to touch. The pressure of the ticking clock felt like it was crushing her chest. Zara's fingers moved quickly over the interface, entering commands, her vision blurry from the radiation and exhaustion. The display flickered as she hit a series of buttons, and then, just as she feared, a loud, deafening beep filled the air. Emergency. Core breach imminent. Her heart dropped. The core wasn't stable. The safety mechanism had failed, and the energy in the core was reaching uncontrollable levels again. "No, no, no," Zara muttered, slamming her fist against the panel in frustration. She was out of options. Her thoughts raced as she desperately tried to find a solution, but time was slipping away. The reactor's energy was becoming more erratic, the pulse of power escalating with every passing second. Zara knew that the only way to stop it was to manually override the core's final sequence, something no engineer had ever survived attempting. She had to physically enter the power center and reset the fusion engine. Without hesitation, she pushed herself forward. The glowing conduits crackled around her as she crawled through the narrow access tunnel, heart pounding, her body begging her to stop. But she didn't stop. Not yet. In the distance, she could see the final control panel, the last obstacle before she could shut down the reactor once and for all. With every step she took, the energy surged around her, and Zara knew this was her last chance. The system was unstable, the power dangerously high. If she didn't reset it now, Yindra would be lost. The final challenge had come, and Zara had no choice but to face it head-on. The countdown was at 0, and in that moment, Zara knew that everything depended on the next step she took. The reactor chamber was alive with energy. Zara's every step sent shockwaves through the floor, vibrating with the force of the volatile core. The air felt thick and oppressive, as the walls seemed to pulse in rhythm with the reactor's deadly heartbeat. Zara could hear the hum of the machinery, the eerie, dissonant sound that filled her ears like a warning. Her breath was ragged, her body trembling under the immense pressure and radiation she had been exposed to. She had reached the final control panel, the one that would either save the planet or destroy it. With every second ticking away, the energy in the core was escalating at an alarming rate. Zara's hand shook as she approached the interface, her mind racing through the final steps of the protocol she had memorized. This was it. She had one chance. One moment to make things right. Zara's fingers hovered over the control panel, the warmth of the reactor pulsing through her suit. Her heart thudded in her chest, louder than the reactor's violent hum. She could feel the pain in her bones from the radiation, the overwhelming fatigue from hours of exertion, but there was no time to rest. She could hear Ryan's voice echoing in her mind, urging her to retreat, to stop, to save herself. But Zara knew there was no turning back. With a deep breath, she pressed the final button. The screen flashed a brilliant red, followed by a deep resonating whoosh as the power output adjusted. Zara watched in intense focus, praying that the reactor would stabilize in time. The seconds stretched endlessly, and she couldn't tell whether the panic surging inside her was from the imminent danger or the overwhelming exhaustion that was pulling her under. Then, a sudden change. The violent shaking stopped. The walls, which had been vibrating uncontrollably, grew still. The low hum of the reactor shifted from a menacing growl to a steady, calming hum. The lights in the chamber flickered for a moment and then turned green. Normal. Zara let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, her body relaxed. The reactor was stable, but her victory was bittersweet. The damage to her body from the radiation was too severe. The time she had spent in the core chamber, the strain of fighting against the power of the reactor, had taken its toll. Zara felt lightheaded, her vision blurring as she struggled to stay upright. The adrenaline that had carried her through the past hours was now wearing off, and she realized, with grim clarity, that the energy she had spent fighting the core was too much for her body to handle. The intercom crackled again, Ryan's voice urgent and panicked. Zara, do you hear me? Please respond. You did it. You saved the planet. Come back. Please don't do this to me. But Zara could no longer respond. She was too weak. The words, though she could hear them, felt like they were coming from a distant world. Her body felt as though it were made of lead, her limbs too heavy to move. She collapsed to her knees, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The reactor had been saved. Yindra had been saved. But at a great personal cost. Zara's eyes fluttered closed, and the noise of the reactor seemed to fade into the background. She thought of her family, her friends, Rian. She thought of the bright future she had fought for, the future she had saved with the ultimate sacrifice. Tears welled in her eyes, not for the pain she was in, but for the people she had protected. She had done it. Against all odds, she had saved them. The hum of the reactor, now steady and calm, filled the silence around her, a gentle reminder that her sacrifice had not been in vain. She had given everything to stop the destruction, to prevent the end of the world. Zara smiled weakly, the overwhelming sense of relief flooding her chest as she whispered to herself. I did it. Minutes passed. The team outside had no idea how much time had passed, how much Zara had endured. Ryan, frantic and on the verge of losing hope, was shouting orders through the comms, trying to organize a rescue operation. But it was too late. Zara had given everything she had, but just as all seemed lost, a soft, steady voice broke through the stillness. The emergency crew had arrived. The doors to the core chamber slid open, revealing Ryan, his face a mask of disbelief and relief. His eyes searched frantically for Zara, his heart pounding in his chest. He could hardly breathe, fearing the worst. When his eyes landed on her kneeling on the floor, her eyes half closed, he rushed to her side, cradling her in his arms. Zara! Zara! He shouted, his voice breaking as he checked for signs of life. But when his eyes met hers, he saw that the light was still there, though faint. I saved them, Zara whispered weakly, her voice barely audible but her words carrying the weight of 1,000 victories. The reactor is stable. Yindra is safe. You're safe. Rian's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, he simply held her, unable to speak. He had feared that he had lost her, but here she was, alive, though barely. Zara looked up at him, her breathing shallow but steady. Tell them that it was worth it, she whispered. Tell them that it was worth it. And with that, Zara's eyes closed for the final time, a peaceful smile on her face as she finally let go. A new beginning. The planet of Yahindra was saved. Thanks to Zara's sacrifice, the core was stabilized, and the people of the planet would continue to live and thrive. Her bravery, her determination, and her love for her world would never be forgotten. The engineers, scientists, and civilians who now lived under the protection of the reactor would carry on her legacy. They would rebuild, grow stronger, and ensure that no one would have to face such darkness again. As the days passed, a memorial was built in Zara's honor, on the very spot where she had given everything to save the planet. A plaque was erected with a simple but powerful inscription: "For the survival of our world, she gave everything. She will never be forgotten." In the quiet of the new world that Zara had helped to protect, her name was whispered in reverence, her story passed on through generations, ensuring that her sacrifice would live on forever in the hearts of all who knew the truth of the ultimate fight for survival.